Welcome back to PLS 510. Today, I want to start the unit on pasture management, and this will be spread over, right now I'm planning a total of 4 different videos, and one of which will be a short explanation of the NRCS Graze tool. So let's get started. You really cannot do a good job of describing pasture management or making pasture management recommendations without having a pretty good idea of the goals of the pasture. In this picture, the pictures on this screen, for example, the goals for this grass-fed beef operation in western Kentucky is going to be somewhat different than possibly this goat operation down in Clay County, or this thoroughbred operation in central Kentucky, and finally this cow-calf operation in Livingston County. Some things will overlap, but the fine points will be slightly different. So I'd like you to spend just a minute, stop the video, if you will, and just write down for the system that you might visualize as yours, what your pasture goals are. And I'm going to pause just a moment here on the video and let you do that. So you can stop the replay and do that yourself too. You can compare your list to this list from one of my previous classes. And here are the pasture goals that we came up with in class. Environmentally sound. We already know that forages are important to meeting the best management practices for the Ag Water Quality Act in Kentucky. And I think that's exactly right. Forages are part of the solution to being able to be environmentally responsible with our livestock operations. And it also, number 2, goes without saying that we have enough yield or carrying capacity. And we're using that word carrying capacity possibly without defining it, but we'll just do that for now. A little later in our lectures, we will go over definitions. One of the goals for pasture may be feeding hay as little as possible, and that's a good goal. Another one may be a thick stand of grass, that's what's understood there, for hoof support for horses. And we act like horses are the only species that need hoof support. In fact, cattle do too, especially when we have them on the farm year-round in wet weather. And we certainly would love to have a low amount of weeds in our pasture operation. We'd like it to be logistically efficient. And whenever I say that, I'm thinking of, is it easy to move animals around on the farm? Can we get them up and treat them for, say, intestinal worms, or, vaccinate them, or do anything else for health purposes or management purposes? And all of those go into how efficient, how effective your pasture system is. It is always a good idea to grow your pasture, manage your pasture with the minimum needed use of herbicides and chemical fertilizers if we can. So it's not just the point of, the goal is not just to be low input, but a lot of times putting only the inputs that we absolutely need is a way to maximize our profit. And then many times, and certainly for me, having a pasture goal of having good aesthetics adds to the farm, adds to your personal enjoyment probably, if you were a farmer, of the farm. For the purpose of our discussion, we're going to use these 5 major goals as a way to organize the points that I'd like to make about pasture management. Long grazing season, intake and quality, utilization, maximum regrowth, and persistence. First of all, I'd like to have you think for a moment how pasture management changes with different goals. And here are our goals again: long grazing season, intake and quality, utilization, maximum regrowth, and persistence. So, how might you change your pasture management to meet those goals? And I'll pause just a moment. You can pause the replay and write down a few pasture management changes that you might want to make. And it might be easier if you just imagine a hypothetical farm, your farm, or somebody's farm close by, where you can see shortcomings and you want to change their management. Here are some examples that I came up with. If the pasture goal is a long grazing season, one of the first things that comes to my mind is addition of other forages and stockpiling tall fescue. For intake and quality, I thought of renovating tall fescue with clover or just adding legumes in general to improve the quality and increase the intake of pasture. For utilization, we could do several things. Usually, we can increase the percent utilization by increasing the number of paddocks and shortening the time on pasture. We can do it simply by adding water points, in other words, water development on the farm, and fencing to aid in the ease of rotation so that we're able to do it more easily and get the livestock to the points where they need to be. For goal 4, the maximum regrowth goal or resilience goal, I thought of changing grazing patterns to allow for maintaining residual height and pasture rest. And for persistence, I added strategic feeding of hay, and that would mean that would be related to the pasture rest, but also nutrient replenishment on the farm, managing for a strong grass stand for hoof support, and weed management. Once you know your goals, we do need to take an inventory of what you have for system resources on the farm. So I have inserted infrastructure here for system because a lot of these things are infrastructure. But here's a list that a previous class came up with. We need a good perimeter fence. We'd like to have natural water sources that we can develop, streams and ponds. It is less than ideal to let cattle or any livestock have direct access to streams and ponds for environmental reasons, but also for the water quality reasons. And you can envision ponds you've seen as you drive around Kentucky, particularly in the late summer, and they'll be algae filled and in general pretty low in quality. Another thing about ponds, if you have tall fescue, and most of us do, then the livestock are going to be heat stressed in the summer and they're going to try to spend some time in the ponds, which makes that water muddy, oftentimes full of fecal material and urine, so truly less than optimal water source. Of course, the soil resource is something we should consider. Its natural fertility, its depth, and that's something that, of course, we've explored with the web soil survey. The next bullet is the ability to distribute water across the system, and we've mentioned before the importance of having water spread out across a system to increase the percent utilization, to also increase the distribution or improve the distribution of manure and urine. And this class came up with Smart Friends as a pasture resource, and I think that's a good point. It is one of the absolute truths about farming in general is that farmers tend to look to other farmers for their most reliable or trusted source of information. And certainly people who have done it before you and where you like their results, that's certainly a good source of information and a good resource for you. Of course, unbiased information sources are important to have, and these can be from the Extension Service at UK or another public land-grant university or other public university, but it could be a trusted commercial representative that has proven to be have your interests at heart and not commercial interests. Shade is going to be an infrastructure resource, of course, and terrain that allows for making stored feed is going to be good because that is going to be something that allows us to manage pasture better. So the main ones are going to be fence, water, and shade. And if you are making an assessment of a farm, then these are three things to make note of and to keep in mind, especially. And finally, what's your forage supply? And you might think of several forages that you presently have or would like to have, but I'm going to come up with a list myself after I pause and let you write down a few things. Some of the most common forage supplies, of course, are going to be fescue or other cool season based grasses with good clover. We could have improved grasses such as orchard grass. We could have some alfalfa for high quality hay and pasture. We could add summer annuals or perennials for both hay and pasture. Adding stockpile tall fescue is quite common for extending the grazing season in the fall. Adding winter annuals like small grains, crimson clover, and ryegrasses are also possible, a little less common, you would say, than some of these others. And of course, your forage supply has to include stored feed for probably 60 to 90 days of the year, depending on, of course, the year and your need. One of the things that I've always found difficult is trying to visualize, look at a farm and get a tally of acres and forages and try to visualize where they might be short and where they need to have additional forage. And there is a grazing tool. It's actually a spreadsheet that will let you do what-if scenarios with various forages, both the ones that you happen to have yourself or that you find yourself trying to assess, and then what might be the effect of changes on your forage balance. And we will do a run, at least one, with the NRCS Graze tool this semester. One of the things that you need to think about, and that's one of the things that the Graze tool will help you do, is to look at this seasonal growth versus need for our cool season systems. And here on the screen is, of course, the graph with the blue line being the stylized production of cool season yield. And for the purposes of reality, there is a big push of yield in the spring, a dip in the summer, and probably the fall peak is less pronounced than this. But this is going to be, in general, true. The dotted line is the livestock forage requirement for growing animals. And since livestock requirements are typically based on their body weight, as animals grow, they will have a slightly increased need for dry matter. So that's why that line is not flat, and it goes up slightly. And of course, the red arrows point to the periods of time where there are deficits, and there are some others, like over here in the late fall and winter, where you're going to have some method of filling in the feed needed for those periods. Now, some people will, a lot of times I think we gain weight with livestock in the spring and early summer, and they hang on and they start losing weight, losing body condition here in the summer, and the same thing may tend to happen in the fall and winter. And ideally, though, we would like to not have cattle or your livestock gaining and losing weight in this fluctuating pattern, particularly if you're seasonally or raising livestock like stockers towards for grass-fed business or just to put weight on them. You don't want them losing weight for any reason. So how are we going to manage this seasonal supply of pasture? And it's part of our pasture management scheme. So how are we going to manage this? Of course, you make hay in the surplus times, and the surplus time by and large is spring and early summer. Now, we will address this in further lectures, but spring and early summer is quite rainy in Kentucky, and we need the rain. We are a rain-fed area. We don't irrigate many pastures, so this yield can be hard to capture in a quality package because of rain damage. And of course, we want to add forages that will provide seasonally needed yield, which may be here in the summer or in the late fall and early winter or early spring. And another method that is not quite as practical, but it's certainly something you would want to consider, is to alter livestock numbers by either selling or moving to other fields. In other words, change your numbers so you've got fewer of them, or add acres so that you've got more land, forage to utilize. This is output from the NRCS Graze tool that lets you know what your forage balance looks like. The blue line would represent forage production for a particular system, and the orange line represents forage needs. And the way that the Graze tool works, it works on a strictly percent of body weight method. The reason why we have a jump up here is because we have added stockers or Graze stockers within this period of October, November, December, and January. So that's why you have a bump up in need there. So I'd like you to run at least one scenario using the NRCS Graze spreadsheet, create a hypothetical scenario with livestock, and we'll use cattle for this model and some forages, and look at each of the tabs generated by the model, and for soil suitability, use a value of 1. You will also find in the lectures this week a short lecture on how to use the NRCS Graze module. This will be a discussion assignment, most likely, for this week in your Canvas shell. So these are the pasture management goals that we will cover in this say 4-part lecture: long grazing season, intake and quality, utilization, maximum regrowth, and persistence. So I will stop here for this section of the videos on the topic of pasture management. Thank you.